So everybody, as promised, please welcome Doug Brown. Doug and I have a really neat history together. If we could tell stories, we would here, but I think it would take up the better part of an hour. Doug has a really cool career arc, not dissimilar to mine, where it doesn't make perfect sense. And I'm going to let Doug maybe walk you through how his career moved. At least I know Doug is in law now, but we met in logistics, and how do those things connect? What I'd like for us to do is dive into the idea of what does it take to be a great coach or consultant. So many people in our industry decide to make that plunge, and it does not end well, because I think folks think it's just a matter of knowledge. I'm just really smart about a thing. I'm really good at a thing, and just listen to me. And that so often doesn't end well. So with that, Doug, if you would just take some time and tell us about your career, because I think it's incredibly interesting. So take it away.
Well, Dave and Dave, thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to chatting with you. I remember back in the days when we were in logistics and we got to go down to the Masters tournament and otherwise tried to impose some sanity on an insane world. Yeah. And then we both managed to escape all that. Mm-hmm. So, I am an executive coach, and I work with lawyers to help them learn the stuff they didn't learn in law school so they can make more money in less time and have a life. And that's not how I started off my career. I started off as a lawyer, and like many other lawyers, I wound up in law school because it seemed like a neat idea at the time. It wasn't like I was trying to save the world or anything. I felt like I was pretty good at it. Mm-hmm. And went to law school at American University in Washington, D.C. after being at Syracuse for undergrad. And I practiced law with a small firm, and it was a small office of a large firm, and so it was really good. It was a good situation, as good as many lawyers can get. I had a great mentor, still a friend to this day, and I got the inside look at what law life was really like. Like some of your audience would see, it's a cool idea to be in hospitality, and then they get in hospitality and they see, back of house, and like, oh, this isn't what I thought it was. Yeah. Mm-hmm. This isn't what I see on television. It's not Cheers or LA Law. Now I'm really dating myself. Yeah. And I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs. And so I found myself limited by the legal business model. This is back in the early 90s. And the goal was you practice law for a long time, and then you move up, you become partner, and, off you go. And I didn't think it was a very good business model, because I was always trying to find a way to solve the problems without beating people over the head in court. And, that it just, and I always think of the best thing to say on the way home from court. So I knew litigation wasn't my thing, right? It's, and it was way too stressful, which is ironic because now I'm a speaker. So I love being in front of audiences behind a microphone, but at the time in court, in my late 20s, it just wasn't my thing. And I reached a certain point in my career, and I started doing a lot of educational programming through the Bar Association. My firm really supported professional development, and recruiters came calling, and they offered me this opportunity at this little logistics company, which is in Naugatuck, Connecticut, of all places. It was like going from a crown jewel to the backwater kind of thing. But it was a really interesting business. I'd never heard of third-party logistics. And I started off, we were a $30 million company growing to $300 million. I got to do legal work, and I got to get into sales. I did sales training and marketing and human resources and finance. And I got to get involved in everything. And one of my early mentors, who I wound up, when he moved up, I took his job later, was like, just stay in legal, stay the blank out of operations. Yeah, but that's where the fun is, right? That's where I get to get involved in all those things. Yeah. And as the company grew, I got a good reputation. We were acquired, and by a big global logistics company. Mm-hmm. And along the time, they were building a little critical parts business. It was really quite large, actually, for Sun Microsystems at the time. Now I'm really dating myself because I don't think they exist anymore. And that's how I got to meet Dave, your company, in way back.
Mm-hmm.
So long story short, I got a chance in this company when it went global to be the chief of staff for a $30 million business unit within the company, and got to do startups and turnarounds. And I led HR for a while. So I learned a lot of the stuff by doing. I learned famous things that IT people would say. This is a good one. I have to share this. And I had an IT person. I said, well, you got to make a change to this system. And he said, I said, how long would it take? I said, about a month. I said, okay, cool. So a month later, I said, how's it going? He said, I didn't tell you when I could start. So these are okay. So you learn things along the way.
Yes, that is so true.
And so I wound up running the division that ran the critical parts business for Sun Microsystems and others, and then got a global job running aftermarket logistics for this global company. So I'm a lawyer that transitioned onto the business side, and I've reinvented myself a number of times. But I've always been a family person. I know for a lot of people in hospitality, it's the lifestyle is critically important, and the perception that I'm going to have more time than I'm going to have. But I got tired of traveling the globe, and it was September 2008 when I left that company, and that was a very interesting time to leave a company. It was August of 2008. Because in September of 2008, those of us who were in business remember that the wheels came off of the economy almost completely.
Yeah.
And this nice, smooth transition I had planned to go and do my own thing became rather more urgent. And I wasn't going to move the family. We were living in Cheshire, Connecticut, great place to raise the family. And I had always been networking. So I found myself with an opportunity to join the MBA program at Post University, the Malcolm Baldrige School of Business, that was just hiring their early full-time faculty. So I became and with my law degree and my business experience, a full professor and program chair for an online MBA program teaching innovation, entrepreneurship, and leadership, basically teaching people who are going back to get their MBA after at least 5 years in the workplace of how to start their own business, or in this case, how to become a consultant, or whatever it is they wanted to do. And that was fascinating, Dave, because that's when I got the chance to really understand how to teach everything I'd learned, and how to teach adults, and what makes them tick, and how to get things going. So I did that for about 6 years, but at that time, I couldn't afford to support a family on a professor's salary. And luckily they were supportive and said, well, go out into the business community and do what you do. So that's when I started consulting. And I got into consulting, and I was doing consulting for lawyers and logistics companies. And then what I realized with consulting is they want you to fix their problems for them. They don't really want to buy in or do anything. Just go fix me. That wasn't fun for me, because the change didn't stick and there wasn't buy-in. So that's when, years before, I had been involved with a career coach, and he said, before coaching was even a business, he said, you fit the profile for a coach. At that time, I'm a lawyer. I'm like, that's not actually a job. so why would I do that? But then I found that model worked well for my clients, especially my lawyer clients, as I was teaching, because it was much more akin to teaching and helping them unlock the skills they needed to achieve whatever their goals were. So that was a great, it's when I started really doing coaching full time. And I realized that it had always been my leadership style, even back when we worked together and you were at the service provider. And so I said, well, and this is relevant to your folks, is I would work with people who were doing their capstone project. They were doing their business plan. They had something they wanted to start. And oftentimes they would start off and they would have so much in their business plan that it wasn't even possible to complete it practically, never mind academically. And I would regularly have the conversation. I said, do you know what one product Amazon started with? Do you guys know?
Books.
And sometimes they didn't. So, yeah. And they did books for a long time.
Yeah.
And then they
I
went,
think it was just Bezos, right? Him
yeah,
in a
it's just
desk, a
Bezos.
picture of him in a desk with books.
Yeah. And then he got crazy and he started doing records. Remember records and CDs?
They're back now,
And
not CDs, records. They're in.
records are back, right?
Yeah.
So, but he took an idea focused in one tiny little area where he could develop a massive expertise, and then it became Amazon. Now, I don't know. Someday, if I ever get to talk to him, was that his vision? I don't know. Maybe he just wanted to sell books. But so my advice to them was pick a very specific niche where you can develop your expertise and go deep on that. And as I was coaching my students on that over and over again, meanwhile, in my own life, I was out trying to be everything to everybody.
Yeah.
Because I was kind of bored with lawyers and I was bored with logistics companies, having no success. I mean, moderate success, but not what I wanted. And then one day I was talking to a student. I said, what if I followed my own advice? There's something crazy, right?
Mm.
So I doubled down back on lawyers because I have a unique value proposition. Having lived that, having been in-house counsel with a corporation, having taught lawyers for many years, I know how they think. And so I went deep into lawyers. And so I went to the places that lawyers hang out, bar associations. Ironically, not the drinking bar associations, but that's another tie-in, I suppose. And one thing led to another, and I was writing for them and getting more involved. And I had lunch with the president at the time, and she said, I have a different idea. I'd like you to come in and take over as the paid executive director, full-time job for the association to turn it around. I'm like thinking to myself, oh, she needs a bar rescue. So I think there's
brilliant. Well done, Doug.
There's
well
a good
done.
tie-in.
Yeah.
And so that's what I executed with them. I wasn't John Taffer by any stretch of the imagination, but it was very much the same thing. And what I had done in my prior life, which is what are the metrics? What are the numbers? What's actually happening? What do the customers actually want? How do you get your back office squared away? And how do you redo your marketing because it lost its way? And in about 3 or 4 years, I'd returned them to prosperity. And realized that I didn't want to have 10,000 lawyers as bosses, because if it's possible to get PTSD at a job, that'll do it. And I left them better than I found them. And my good friend, Mark Michaels, was the last man standing in a 115-year-old family jewelry company. Did fine jewelry at 21 stores in 5 states and Pandora stores. And he brought me in to transition the business from him so he could retire and as a bridge until his daughters were ready to take over the business. So moving it from generation 4 to generation 5. And I jumped at that because not just because I liked Mark and I had retail experience from my childhood, but the idea of helping a business go from generation 4 to generation 5 successfully, that almost never happens.
Yeah.
So getting a chance to do that was remarkable. So I did that for about 3 years. And then it was 2019 that I was done having between the bar association and as much as I love my team in retail, I was done having employees. I'm like, I don't need employees anymore. I just want to do my own thing. My kids were getting ready to move on and graduate from college. And so along the way, my best friend and mentor through a lot of this had his own coaching and coaching business where he was a lawyer. And I know the other thing that people need to know if they want to think about going into coaching is what's your support model. A lot of people think they want to go and be on their own, and it's pretty lonely. I had tried that before. I thought, boy, this is a great thing. I've got a person who's established who can kind of mentor me, provide the infrastructure, and I'm not by myself. So I joined Summit Success as their chief learning officer and an executive coach in 2019, and been building my coaching practice since. So that is a very long story. I hope we still have listeners after hearing me drag on for 15 minutes on that. But that's kind of the long version of the story.
I love you. I think it's such a cool career arc. And I think that I think when you have, it's interesting. I was talking to my brother about this. My brother and I have done the same athletically and career-wise, we've had the same MO. His was to go deep on one thing, and he just annihilates that one thing.
Mhm.
So he played football, and then I played every sport because I wanted all.
Mhm.
And so he would become a master of one thing, and I would become a jack of all trades. And both of those have their unique applications. Then career-wise, we did the same thing. He's done, basically for the most part, stayed in one discipline his entire career. And you and I have sort of explored and bounced around. And I think it sort of ends up in this inevitable place of coaching and consulting because you're able to draw upon so many different experiences. How do you feel like your career and that multitude of experience allows you to I mean, I feel like you could coach anybody in any profession given what you've done, just about any, maybe.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing, so I think it's really important when you're thinking about becoming a coach to really understand where your value is. I can coach people in lots of different kinds of businesses. It depends on what it is, right? An executive coach is what I'm doing. I'm working with the leadership team on leadership strategies, on finding efficiencies, on how to manage people, on succession planning, and those sorts of things. I wouldn't presume to coach someone who needed subject matter expertise in how to run a bar or a restaurant. I know about customer service, but that's not my industry. But in almost any service business, the principles and disciplines are the same.
Mm-hmm.
I also discovered that, finding things that are closely adjacent to what I already know makes me much more powerful. So in my world with lawyers, it's lawyers, any other kind of business service professional. It's entrepreneur. I've worked a lot with entrepreneurs. I've coached a lot of people trying to become consultants because the fundamental strategy pieces, what business problems do you want to solve? Who do you want to solve them for? What makes your approach unique in the market? What's your business model? How are you going to talk about it in a way that's compelling using their words? What systems and infrastructure do you need to execute in your business model? Those are consistent across businesses. Those are not industry specific. Now, in your guys' world, how to do inventory and set up menus and whatever else, that's much more specific tactical operations things. But that's not really where I'm working with people, unless it happens to be in law. About a third of my clients are lawyers. 2/3 of my clients are lawyers. And the interesting thing is when I started marketing just to lawyers, other people came and said, I know you're working with lawyers, but I got this friend who's an entrepreneur in an aviation business. He just bought it. Can you help him? Like, well, let me talk to him. And turns out the answer is yes. Helped him grow his business by 30% in a year. That's not what I advertise for.
Right.
So as you go out and advertise and pick your lane, it doesn't mean you're not going to get other kinds of business. That's a big fear that many entrepreneurs have when they're starting off in a coaching business is if I go too narrow, then I'll miss out on other opportunities. And it's actually the opposite is true. So if somebody wanted to become a coach and say they wanted to pick a particular industry, say a fast service restaurant or a bar and grill, that doesn't mean they're not going to meet somebody at a totally different kind of establishment that could need their help.
Yeah, I coach on Dave and I both coach on with people that are well outside of the restaurant industry. You have a question, Dave?
Yeah, I do. Actually, I've advertised only in the bar space before, and that turned once into a gig helping somebody with supply chain management in a raw pet food company. Because I'm good at research and technology. She's like, "Can you help?" I'm like, "Yep." I thought I failed, by the way, at the end of it. I was like, it wasn't working, and I called her months later. I'm like, "I'm so sorry." I feel like she's like, "No. Without you, I found the right solution. Without you, I'd had no idea what the questions to ask were, and also it was really cool." But that's not my question. So we keep saying coach and consultant back and forth. And in my experience, still, I'm in this space, but in my experience, there's a lot of there's not a lot of clarity that I found in any community about the differentiation or even just one specific definition. It's a conversation we used to have with Barmetrics head office for a lot. Recently, I was having a conversation with somebody about in terms of a coach versus training, and they said coach is traffic and development, not training, right? That was their little phrase there. A minute ago, you were saying, let me see what it is here, that consultants, when you're a consultant, they wanted you to do it for them. So outside of that and anything I've said, or not really, would you expand on that? What do you see? Because I think a large part of audience, especially in our field, it might be helpful to hear from somebody who does this like professionally. Like you're clearly a pro. How do you see the difference between a consultant and a coach? And then more specifically, is there more of a sphere around coaching that you could put, or more robustness there? Like, what does that really mean in a business space, in a business coach space?
Yeah, sure. I think, when I first started getting into it and you're working on your own marketing, you thought, am I a business coach, or am I an executive coach, or am I a consultant, or am I, and we get hung up ourselves on the labels. But I've been one way or another doing this business for more than 20 years. Nobody wants a coach. Nobody wants a consultant. Nobody wants a strategist. They want a problem solved. They want an opportunity taken care of. They want the outcome they get as the result of getting your service. So when we focus, I'm going to answer your question, but when we focus on what we call ourselves, we're missing the point. The people that I'm working with want a transformation. The transformation usually is about trying to recapture their time, make more money without working harder, make managing people less annoying. That's what they want. Whether I'm using a coaching technique or a consulting technique or something else doesn't really matter to them. But the paradox is, as a society, we love labels, right? Mm-hmm. So in broad, even within coaching, there's different segments of coaching, right? There's career coaching and life coaching and, all the different things. And I think it's really rather simple. I think a consultant, if you're in that mode, you're going in, you're evaluating their business, you are figuring out what's wrong with their business, and you're telling them what they need to do to fix it. So you might go in, you're going to go ahead and you're going to get the metrics to figure out if somebody's overpouring or underpouring, and is the cost per drink and the all the stuff that John Taffer does, right? And then you're going to say, this is the thing you need to do. That's very much consulting. Coaching is a little different in that my job is to work with the owner to ask them the questions so they uncover that themselves. And I'll ask leading questions and I'll have them go do this, go look at this metrics report and tell me what you see. Because my job, one of the ways to put it is in the movies, and there's a hero and there's this back office facilitator. There's this person in Star Wars. You had
the guy in the chair.
Luke.
Yeah.
What's that?
The guy in the chair.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So you had Luke Skywalker, then you had Yoda and Obi-Wan and all the others, right? My job is not, as a consultant wants to be Skywalker, right? Let me come in and save you. I'm more like Obi-Wan or Yoda. My job is to make them better so they can themselves run their business ahead. And so that's my focus, helping them achieve an objective. I do it in a coaching style, which is about asking questions, providing resources, getting them to think differently, holding them accountable, because I'm only picking people as clients who have the stuff inside of them. They've got the information, they've got the ability. They just need it to be refocused in a certain way, much like the guys you see on the PGA Tour on Sunday afternoons. They're all fantastic athletes. And they also know they can't do it without their caddy. They can't do it without their swing coach and their short game coach and all the other things. Mm-hmm. So those people are standing on the sidelines observing, giving pointers, and it's the athlete that has to execute. And the consulting model is, and traditionally is, I'll give you a report. Here you go do that. A coaching on top of that might be, and let me help you step by step implement.
I think one of the issues, so if we speak for a moment to the person, let me set this up a little better. If we go, there's a couple of traditional ways. If you think about like the big firms, they'll hire very young people in and they use them for their energy. You know, they're doing big jobs. So right, we're doing the one-off work. But in the big business world, young folks become consultants early and they learn the trade craft. And then usually when you put that on your resume, they go and they just hop. Their career sort of takes off. They skip many levels of middle management to get to the top of a company that says, oh, wow, you worked for this big firm as an X. We'll hire you as an executive, and the career takes off. And then they need to make a big adjustment once they get inside the company, and there's an adjustment. In our industry, and Dave, you jump in, correct me where I'm wrong, but in our industry, the young are working and they're getting the life and job experience first until they start to flame out a little bit or they lose a little bit of interest, like we all have in something at one point. And to your point, Doug, I think what happened, or they're in between jobs, like it's very common. We see in this industry, I think in particular, a lot of what would you say, like paladins, the Lone Rangers, right? They're out of work either intentionally or unintentionally, and they're going to become a consultant, and they know somebody, they have a network, and so will hire me to do a job. And I get hired to come in and exactly as you said, fix a problem for me. So that's part one. And I think everyone gets that. There was a part where you were talking earlier, and this is where I think folks make huge mistakes, speaking directly to the person who's thinking about making this transition in their career. I think when you get that tag of consultant, you immediately begin, and I've felt this way before. I need to have all the answers. I know all the answers to all the quizzes that have ever been made, and I jump in there and I say, I've been hired to do a thing, and we're going to do this, and I know what I'm doing, and let's go. And then it crashes and burns at an unbelievable level. A lot of money gets spent, nothing gets done. And I think it's because the people who are truly confident, like yourself, who really have been there, you go in not with all the answers, but you go in with all the questions first. You lead with all these exactly to the extent that you can. You want to get exactly the right questions asked. Can you talk a little bit about what you think about that, what advice you might give in those scenarios, and how maybe that's played out for you at some point?
Yeah, I think, Dave, when I was younger, I felt like my job was to have all the answers and have them fast and be right all the time. And I think, this is a little bit like if you want to be a coach, you should think about what you would look for in a coach and be that. So if I'm looking for a coach to help me, and by the way, almost all coaches have their own coach, I want somebody who's not so arrogant as to think they know all the answers, because I know my business better than they do. I want somebody to ask really good questions, make connections that I might not have made, offer insights that I might not have thought of. Tell me I'm wrong, or in coach speak, invite me to consider another point of view. And polite coach speak. And those are the skill there's life experience there that is learned by something that this could be a whole separate podcast, but learned by something that people aren't getting today. And that is making massive mistakes, falling on your face, getting and being, subject to an awful lot of pain, and then picking yourself up, dusting yourself off, and figuring out what's next. That's what people want in a coach. They don't want somebody who, with all due respect to the programs that, I'll certify you as a coach and I'll give you all the materials, then you can hang a franchise sign on your door and say you're a coach. I'm like, okay, that's good for people who are just starting out in business. because they don't know the basics. But the people who are in business 10, 20 years, they've got lots of experience, who are usually the better clients and pay more. They want somebody who's been there, done that. They want somebody with the scars of their own that they can compare notes and say, well, all right, I get you. And so that requires it's emotional intelligence is what I'm trying to get to.
Mm-hmm.
And it is becoming exceedingly rare where someone is self-aware enough who can consider all the different perspectives
Mm-hmm.
and put it together to ask the right questions and get the right thinking going on. Because sometimes the stuff that I come up with when I'm working with my clients feels like at the time it's coming out of total right field. But there's like, oh, that's exactly what I needed. And so you have to have the life experience to do that. So if you are going to be looking to hire a coach to help you in your business, you want somebody who's a little bit further down the road than you are, but not so far down the road that they've lost connection with what it is that it's like to be you.
Mm-hmm. I think too so that's on the coach side. On the consultant side, if you will, like I think there's a lot of folks who are in our industry who, or if they're making that, say, mid-career transition, it's more to consultant than coach. It's more, hey, do it for me mentality. And there's an aspect of that self-awareness or maturity where usually the answers are found in the four walls already. People just aren't listening to them. It's like I can't tell you how many times I've gotten a gig where all I had to do is go talk to people. And in that, I can tell you what that conversation sounds like. And it almost always begins with, I've already told them that ... I've been complaining about ... And all the answers are right there. And it's very easy. What did they say over the weekend, David? For an owner of a place, it's hard to read the label from the inside.
Yeah, it's hard to read the label from the inside of the bottle.
So you stop listening to people that are right there in front of you because they can't possibly know. I don't know. How would you know? Yeah. I think there's a real gift and art in going in and understanding that the beginning to any solution begins with conversations and this harvesting of information. I said in the earlier video too, consultants became known for borrowing your watch to tell you what time it is. That's incredibly accurate. And I remember when I was mid-level management, I hated it when the consultants would come in and come around and have the conversation. And of course I'd have it. And then they would take our ideas and then go present them as if they were their own. And then the leadership would be like, Eureka, these guys are brilliant. You're like, damn it. They're not. What right? So that's consulting that's where it takes the hits, but it's not the consultant's fault. It's leadership's unwillingness to listen and activate on what people have already been telling them. What do you think of that?
And yes, I observed the same thing. And some people are reluctant to hire a consultant or a coach for fear of, I'm going to pay them to look at my watch and tell me what time it is. Mm-hmm. The truth is that owners are under so much pressure financially, operationally, from their people, from their spouse, from their bank, from their suppliers, that they are wind up in this perpetual state of freeze, fight, or flee. The amygdala fires up, and they literally, the science demonstrates that when you're in that state, you can't use your higher thinking functions. It shuts down because your body literally goes into survival mode. So that means you can't see what's in front of you. And you're not listening because you're just worried about surviving. And it becomes such an ingrained habit, you don't even know you're doing it. Mm-hmm. So oftentimes, the right person coming in will start working with that owner so that owner can like a physical therapist might try to get the muscle to release so you can start training again. They'll start working with the owner to help them unpack what's going on by asking some questions and dialing back that stress. And it could be, and that's an art more than a science. But once you do that, then they can start to process differently. So that's why it's like they feel like they can't see it. Well, they can't see it because they literally get myopia. It just isn't, it's impossible to see it when you're under stress. So the coach or the consultant is going to help them interrupt the pattern. Tony Robbins, the great, coach, father, one of the fathers of the industry, always talks about interrupting the pattern. You've got to interrupt the habit and the pattern that's been going on. And that's a big job of the coach or the consultant, is the pattern interrupt. And when I first got into this business, I would have one of my very early clients said, I just can't get these people to follow the rules. I've given them the procedures. I tell them what they need to do, and they're just not doing it. I just can't understand what their problem is. And at the time, I had to find a better way to say this, but I said, more than half the problem is staring you in the mirror. Because when I went to talk to the people, they loved him. They wanted to make him happy. They had no idea what that looked like. Because every time they came to him, he would change his mind. He set up a situation where it was impossible for his team to succeed in the name of helping them.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was only through a little bit of subtle diplomacy, working with, it was a small team, we got that turned around, and he was able to achieve his goals. And he was running an insurance brokerage in my town, and he achieved his goal. He was bought out by a big bank, and now he's heading up the big division for the bank using the stuff that I taught him. But he was so busy in fight mode that he couldn't see what was right in front of him. And that's when you're going in to an industry like, whether it's law or it's hospitality, either maybe more, well, let's presume somebody's got a lot of technical training. Let's pretend they went to all the courses and they know the technical side of running the business, but it's still not working. Like a lawyer goes to law school to learn how to be a technician. It's not that they don't know what to do. Something's in the way. Or they're what Michael Gerber calls the accidental entrepreneur. They had an entrepreneurial seizure. They said, let's open my own restaurant. There's one down the road. The kitchen looks good. That doesn't look that hard.
I love
they
the
don't
cook.
actually have the training. That's a different problem.
Yeah.
I have a follow-up question for you from very much earlier. I have my own answer for this, but I want to hear yours.
Okay.
And I love what you said. You said in coaching, if you really want to be successful, I'm paraphrasing, I don't know your exact words, to write down that hard. You said something like, you really want to get niche. You want to get specific down to something to be successful. How niche? Because I have a little tree I drew here, and I could do it for our industry, but how niche do you think that is? Like, how tightly down should one go to make it easier for themselves, at least to start? Maybe you get 2 or 3 niches, but what does that look like in your estimation?
The way I'm going to answer the question is I've done a lot of training of my own, and I went to what I affectionately call speaker school, and the one of the instructors is a fantastic, famous person, and so I'll answer your question this way. Do you know what the difference is between a river and a swamp?
A river is a swamp is a river that's been blocked up.
The river's moving. I would think the water's
It
moving.
moves, yeah.
A swamp has no boundaries. A river has banks, has boundaries. And the way rivers get really powerful is very narrow boundaries. That's how we wind up with the Grand Canyon.
Right.
So as applied to niching, the more narrow and specific you are, the more powerful you are. So I said before, I coach, my target client is lawyers and law firms. It's actually much more specific. It's lawyers who've been in practice 20 plus years, who are 45 to about 65. They run the practice or a practice group inside of a larger firm, but the firm is probably under 15 lawyers. And their practice areas are generally family law, estate planning law, or business law, although there are others.
Yep.
And and there was one other thing that I just forgot about, but that's pretty specific, right? So I'm not
Yeah.
looking at big firm, I there's other things that I can do, but my best clients do that. And my best clients have military background or,
So you have
college.
like all the way down to lawyers that did it and have a military background.
Yeah. And it's not that I wouldn't take someone, but the reason I added that, and if they played college sports, that might work too,
They're
is
coachable.
because they understand teamwork.
Yeah.
They understand what coaching is.
Yeah.
They know that going after something all by themselves is often a fool's errand. And so I don't have to convince them of that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And so the more that's pretty narrow, right?
Yeah.
The good news is that I also know that 75% of the lawyers in the country practice in firms of 10 or less.
Right.
And I know that for what my rates are and value proposition, I don't want to work with somebody. I'm not the best. Let me say it a different way. I'm not the best fit for someone who is just starting out, who needs to learn the basics of a law practice.
You need a common language.
There needs to be a common language. They need to have experienced and overcome some adversity, and have some grit and be coachable. So that actually, when I go to use the tools to find clients, that actually helps you get pretty powerfully narrow on what you're looking for.
Yeah.
And, Dave, when I started before I started focusing on lawyers, the one industry where I got clients was couriers and supply chain.
Yeah. Makes perfect sense.
Because I had the street cred.
Yep.
Right.
For it. And I spent a lot of time. This is really important for people thinking about coaching and starting their own business. I was in Connecticut, not a very big marketplace, but it felt large. And I made this mistake for years. I didn't define what I just defined for you. So as I went and talked to each group, I talked about different things. I talked about, well, you have a need in restaurants. So I talked about how I could help in restaurants, and somebody else was a manufacturer, and on and on and on and around we go, not realizing that everybody is a small community. So everybody thought I was great, but nobody knew what I did because I talked about it differently every single time I talked about it.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Like, I'm trying to be helpful, but
I think that's that leads into what I was going to say next. So if I have in my head this avatar of a 30-something-year-old person that loves hospitality, it could be an owner. So I have these conversations too, by the way. So it's probably born of real life experience. Bartenders, bar managers, general managers, owners love the industry, but at some point want to extract themselves from the day-to-day ops and the rigors and the nights, the weekends, and the cleaning of vomit and all that stuff that can be the joys
Literally.
of hospitality. Yeah.
Yep.
And so when somebody in my avatar, this person says, I'm smart, I'm capable, I know, I'm going to start up Dave and Dave Hospitality, right? To something basic. They're going to go launch their consulting or coaching brand. And I think they're very willing to do anything and everything that comes their way, hospitality related. For example, I'll get asked all the time, because we're in one of the things we have as an inventory business. We'll get asked all the time, will you create a cocktail menu for me? We need a cocktail menu. And I'm like, if I do that, I can promise you only one outcome, and that is you'll have nobody ordering your cocktails. Like, that's the only thing that's going to happen. You can be this close to it and not be expert, right? That's not what I do. And you should go hire, and we'll push people. Dave and I push people to other people all the time. But if we're thinking about our avatar and this new person, exactly to your point, Doug, if we bring this like very home, if you're out there and you're gunslinging consultant and you're taking anything and everything that comes your way, you are creating temporary income, which I understand that you need. You also run the risk of doing incredible brand damage. You have just a very initial period of time to establish who you are. And if you're trying to establish who you are off brand and you're failing, absolutely no one's recommending you for future gigs. Even if you said, in my case, look, I'm really good at this. You asked me to create a cocktail menu. I'm sorry it bombed. What'd you think? Like, I don't know anything. You should say no to the gig. I think my advice, and I'd like to hear what you have to say, Doug, to these folks that are transitioning into a coach or consultant role is you need to be positioned to say no. You need to, if you want to create a powerhouse coaching or consulting brand, know what you do really well, because you're going to accept a lot of money, or you're going to accept some version of payment to generate an outcome. And your number one source of new revenue are your advocates. And I think that gets really lost on people. Sorry, been fighting a cold. What do you think of that, guys?
Before you answer, we have 13 minutes. I want to keep you on time because I know you have a hard
Okay. Yeah, boy, we could go on for a long time, but I think and I'm happy to come back. I think that there's this fallacy that if I try to do lots of things, I'll somehow make money doing it. And you might get lucky. But we live in a specialist world. So the client avatar that you're talking about has a really specific problem that keeps him or her up at night. And if you can identify the kinds of people that you want to help and the problems that you're really good at solving, then go solve those problems. And people will pay for that because they don't want a generalist. If you got a problem with your foot, you're not going to your GP, you're going to go to your podiatrist. So if you've got a knack for motivating back of house staff to move faster and smile all the time, and that's a problem that is pervasive, go solve that problem. Go to everybody you know and solve that problem. Yeah. If it's metrics of where you're losing money in the alcohol, what's the biggest problem? And then go solve that. Because one of the best pieces of advice I got was from another former business partner who we were sitting at a restaurant one night, and he said, Doug, I believe you can help almost anybody with almost everything because I know you. And I know you actually can. Nobody else is going to believe you. They're just not.
Right.
Yeah.
So pick the thing or things that are related and go be really good at those. Like Amazon was really good at books. So I'm sure I'll foul this up, but within the restaurants, there's lots of different categories of restaurants, whether it's by price point or by type of cuisine or whatever it is. Pick a lane, try it out. If it doesn't work, pick another lane. But if you're trying to go after the 5-star restaurant and the diner down the street, you're not going to get either one of them.
There's a lot of, actually, you didn't follow that up at all, because when I was doing the niche thing, I started hospitality that branches into hotels and restaurants. Now there's others too, but those are the big ones. And then with restaurant, you can get down into different areas, types of restaurants, and then areas of the restaurant. And I had, there's a kid I know, and he had his lessons to learn. He didn't perfect it at the point that I knew him. He decided he wanted to work with bars or restaurants or bars with a strong bar program that were doing complex cocktails that needed batching, that weren't too big, that were smaller affairs. Like, he got very, very specific. And again, he made his mistakes and whatever. It doesn't really matter because he made a ton of money at it and kept getting clients. They started to like, okay, he messed this up, but he knows what he's doing, and he refined his process. And it was that narrow, that extremely narrow, which anybody in our industry can tell you. Even in Miami alone, there's maybe out of the 1,200 bars and restaurants here, I don't know, 50. But that's enough. That's enough in this market. Now,
when I'm working with people on this, you're right, Dave. When I'm working with people on this, say, I'm going to go narrow. Okay, good. Go narrower.
Narrower.
Keep going.
Keep going.
Going until you can't get any narrower.
Yeah.
And go try it out. And if you get learn everything you can about where do those people hang out? How do
Yep.
they view the world? What words do they use to describe their problems?
Yeah.
And go get it.
And
And you need to adjust, but don't try to be everything to everybody at once, because the myth that you might make money, you'll make less money.
Yep.
And you'll make it more slowly, because you're more like a swamp than you are a river.
Right. And people can't quite understand who you are. I have one last thought on this. I want to turn over to Dave. That's our running joke. We just say, Dave.
The other day.
I don't know if we're funny or not. We think we are. Just one concept that's been batted around here, not just here. Dave and I heard it again, like you said, this week, and we were at an amazing, just incredible conference. And that's the perspective of the client. You've said it multiple times, and I think that it's worth putting on a bit of a spotlight on it. That as a coach or a consultant, doesn't matter which one, it really doesn't, because they're bedfellows, right? They're different, but they're bedfellows. Looking to two things. One, always try to look at it from the perspective of your client, right? Try to see from their direction. And I'm curious if you agree with this. And then the other piece is, and this is what they said at the conference, that just I never thought about it. I was like, you're right. If you're so good at this one thing, it probably seems really easy to you, and therefore maybe less valuable. Like, I can do it in my sleep. It's not that way for them. You very well might look like a magician to them, because they can't get through it. Like you said, they're stuck. They're in myopathy, or they can't see the forest of the trees. So don't get too concerned or worried about, is what I'm doing valuable? They'll let you know, and it probably isn't. If they're paying for it, they're saying yes, then yeah, it's valuable.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Just because it's simple to you and easy to you doesn't mean it's not valuable to somebody else. In fact, some of the most popular programs that we run are the simplest.
Yeah.
How to manage your time. You'd think lawyers would know how to manage their time. They do, but they can always get better.
Yeah.
There's huge value in the simplicity.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're working with people who want to take their expertise and turn it into a business, they always start with that, like their expertise. Like, okay, that's great. That's not where we start. I don't care if you want to be a coach or a consultant or a swami or whatever you want to be. What problems do you want to solve? And who do you want to solve them for?
Mm-hmm.
Every business starts with that foundation. Because when you're very clear on the problems you want to solve, and you match up who actually has the problems, right?
Yeah.
The problems you solve and the people you solve them for, that's a business. Because until you have a customer, you don't have a business. And people don't want to hire coaches or consultants, or, they want the outcome. They want the outcome. They want the output. They don't care what kind of hammer you use. They don't care what kind of, system you have. Can you solve my problem? Have you solved problems like that before? Can you help me solve my problem so I can still be the hero? Okay. And do I trust you?
Mm-hmm.
People will not buy your coaching system. They're going to buy you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Authenticity is the number one currency.
Dave and I talk about that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, perfection isn't a thing. People don't want to work with perfect people.
Yeah.
They want to work with real people.
Yeah. Look,
like you guys.
this has been awesome. And I know you've got a hard stop at 4. So I've got this amazing page in front of me that I want to try to recap what I think I've learned today. If I can do it, and you guys tell me if you think I get it.
Go for it, man. You got 5 minutes and go.
Right. So before I get into that, I love the funnel idea. So imagine if you're going to be that avatar person who's thinking about becoming a consultant, you're picking your industry. Here we've picked bars and restaurants versus hotels. Am I going in concepts, front of the house, back of the house, as we keep getting narrow? You pick one of those, are you going to get into food creation, food cost, food inventory, any of those amazing number of things, all specialized. Getting even more narrow, are you on the creative side? Are you on the service side? Are you on the cost side of it? We probably just described 50 jobs, specialties. There's a lot. And if you really want to make a name for yourself, crush one of those things, maybe two, but you can't crush 20 of those things. And so be mindful of that. So I love that funnel. I have an image in my mind already, Dave.
Nice.
So
as you do.
That's part one. All right, part two. I'm trying to get through the last 4 minutes here.
You're good.
The two big things to add: what problems are you trying to solve, and who are you solving them for? That's good stuff. And then the three big things that I got out of this is, number one, ask the right questions. Don't come in thinking that you know the answers. You're not being hired because you know how to do a thing. You're getting hired to achieve an outcome, a result. You're getting paid to get that done. And that begins with asking the right questions, not having all the right answers. The second one's pattern interruption. So that's a big part. What Doug talked about was it's a huge component of being a successful consultant or coach. It includes pattern interruption in a healthy way, though. So don't confuse. You're going to do things the way I say, and I'm the new sheriff in town. I get the new sheriff in town routine in this industry at an unholy level,
Yeah.
right? It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's
We could do a whole show on what not to do.
Oh, it's not. Hey, I may take you up on that because it's actually a really great idea.
That was one of my questions I couldn't get to.
Yeah, I use the book, The First 90 Days. I've got a video on my YouTube channel about that. And then the third one is to get narrow. You put your personal brand at risk when you go in and you're saying, look, and I'm an at-large consultant that does all things for all people because I'm so damn smart in hospitality. And you may be really smart. Look, it might even be true. You can even be, this can be as difficult as you are an award-winning chef and you know everything about running an amazing kitchen. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're amazing at influencing others in doing that same thing. That may not be your skill set. Those are two different gigs.
Well, and I want to, yes, and that please don't, if you're thinking of watching this, don't just hang out your shingle and call yourself a coach. Get yourself educated. The most important thing you can do as a coach is to study how and why people behave.
Best resources. Best resources for that, in your opinion?
I've got a bunch of resources. I can give you my favorite books in the show notes.
Cool.
And it's not necessarily running out and get a coaching or certification, but you need to really become a student of why people behave the way they do. You have to be really curious. You have to be learning all the time. And most important thing, I'll share a link to this too. Simon Sinek is a fantastic speaker, and I think this is the if I leave you with one thought, if you're thinking about becoming a consultant or a coach or whatever we want to call it today, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So you got to have a great, big, hairy, audacious why you want to go out and help your people solve the problems that they solve, because that's what's going to get people to buy from you. That's from Simon Sinek, Start With Why, and the TED Talk, How Great Leaders Inspire Action. I have every single client watch that, because most people miss that people buy what you do, don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. So before you go down this road, make sure you're really clear on your why. And that doesn't make up for other lack of skills, but without that, you're not going to get there.
Well, I can't think of a better way to end it. Doug, thank you so very much for your time. And I have noted that twice you've offered to come back. So, right, that is not lost on us.
Man.
Well, we're not that. I'm in Bluffton, and you're out near Atlanta. We're not that far apart.
No, man, we could do this live. Yeah,
right. Live and in person.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Dave, and Doug live. How about that?
Yeah.
Thanks so much here. I'll give you my people want to learn more about what I do at DougBrownJD.com, and I'll give you the link in the show notes.
Yeah, that's great. Okay,
Dave, ending it out. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks,
this was awesome.
Okay, thanks, guys. Talk soon.
All right.